Hi, everybody. Welcome back to another week here at Wired Differently. This week is a little bit different. We've got just me, Christina Blue Hooper, your business designer. My co-hosts are off saving other entrepreneurs one at a time. So this week we have a really interesting topic. We're talking about why business owners can struggle to pay themselves a lot of times. And there are many reasons for this, but our first question was, what is the biggest mistake that you see entrepreneurs make when it comes to their income? And I would have to say that paying themselves is one of the biggest ones that people tend to struggle with. Because early on in your business, it's like we've been taught that you have to continually reinvest. You have to continually put money back in. What you put money into is going to make all these returns. So many entrepreneurs will work to the point that they can hire their first person or they can start outsourcing some of the work. And instead of paying themselves, they start putting that money into other places. They start buying that software they've had their eyes on. They sign up for that mastermind that they've been, seeing all these promotions about. They hire their first assistant. They outsource some projects. Like that money starts going out as quickly as it comes in. The problem with this is that when you're not paying yourself, you're not as invested in your own business. There's only so long that you can go on hopes and dreams of what the future is going to be. And before you know it, you're making, 10,000 a month, 15,000 a month, and you're still not paying yourself. So it's really important very early on to be thinking about that and to be thinking about how you're going to pay yourself. One of my favorite things that I like is Mike Michalowicz and Profit First. And I love the way he teaches this strategy because so many entrepreneurs take it as money in minus money out, and what's left over is equal to profit. And profit is what they get paid out of. That's how a lot of entrepreneurs think about their paychecks, think about the income that they can generate from their business. What he teaches you to do is to flip it around a little bit. So revenue minus profit equals expenses, so that you're not overspending, overcommitting to expenses without first factoring in your profit margins, which is what you need to grow. But even more than that, in what you're doing, you pay yourself first. Right. So you're actually going to make sure that you're taking out, and you can look up Profit First, you can look up some of the charts, but he's got it where if you're making less than, 250,000, less than $250,000 a year, the entrepreneur should be getting paid 50%. And that is one of the things that you're accounting for in your expense budget, right? Like that's something that you're planning for. You are an expense, you are a paycheck. You're not getting paid out of what money is left over. So that's something that's really important to consider when you're thinking about how you track your money, where you spend your money, how you plan your expenses, which kind of leads us into one of our other questions on how can business owners start making more informed financial decisions without getting overwhelmed by all of the numbers. Part of that is to be tracking, is to actually get visibility into your numbers, into your data, so that you know what's going on. You know where stuff is going, you know what your expenses are, you know what your profit margins are, and not only across your whole business, but on your individual product lines. Because I can't tell you how many times I've talked to entrepreneurs and they're like, I have a messaging problem. I'm trying to sell more of this thing. Like I'm trying to sell more of my group coaching program. That one is probably one of the ones that I see the most. Like I'm trying to sell more of my group coaching program. And I'm not really sure how. I'm not really sure what I'm doing. I'm not really sure how to get the messaging across. I can't see how to explain the value of it. And we'll start digging into it and find that they don't like it. And they can't really quantify why a lot of times. They're like, yeah, I started the group coaching program because my schedule was completely full, because I couldn't take any more one-on-one clients, because I had a bunch of people that couldn't afford my rate. So I wanted to do this where I can charge a little bit less per person because I'm working with 10 people at a time. And all of these decisions make sense in the moment leading up to it. But then when we do the math, we figure out that, we look at how many hours a week they're spending running that program. And it might be, in one case, it was 20 hours that someone was spending running that program. They were charging people $35 a person. And I was like, well, okay, what is your capacity? How many people can you take in this program before people aren't really getting the benefit from participating in it anymore, or before it's overwhelming for you to run? Like, what is your maximum number? And it's usually around 30 people, right? So like we can pull out a calculator and do the math. 30 people times $35 a month, that's only about $1,000. And if you're putting 20 hours a week in, that's 80 hours a week. So we take that divided by 80, you're making $13 an hour. That's not worth it. And intrinsically, we know those kind of things, but we don't necessarily see the data unless we're tracking it, unless we're running the numbers on how many people can I take, what am I charging, how many hours am I spending delivering it. If you're a solopreneur and you're the main one doing it, that. If you've got staff, you also have to look at like your staff overhead, how many hours they're spending, what additional resources are needed to deliver this particular product. Are there specific softwares? Are there things that you're having to pay for to do this so that you can make these financial decisions? And to avoid getting overwhelmed, take it a little bit smaller. Focus on certain things at a time. You shouldn't be, especially as a small business owner, trying to manage and track like 10, 20 products or services. You should have it narrowed down to just a small number of products or services that you're doing, that you enjoy doing, that get the result that you promise to your client, and that you can track and ensure is profitable and you can optimize for profitability. Like in that group coaching example that I gave, if somebody, like once we ran those numbers, they immediately went back and were able to take it down to 10 hours a week, which doubled their revenue, but it still wasn't quite enough. And ultimately, they ended up deciding to cut that program. So when you can do this, you can start to spend your time and energy where you need to be, because they were putting so much time into the group coaching program. They didn't have the time and energy to put into their other larger containers that were profitable, that were delivering the promise to the clients, that they enjoyed doing, all of these things. So they were able to cut that out, cut out the waste, and put that time into better areas. So just setting up some type of tracking, making a calendar appointment with yourself to go back and review your numbers and to think about what's going on can be incredibly helpful when you're making these financial decisions, and making sure you're not trying to track too many numbers, right? A lot of times, because we have access to so much data nowadays, a lot of our tools will let us see hundreds of data points quickly, easily, and we're tempted to start looking at all of those. Focus on just a few things. Focus on, like, say you're trying to get like a one-on-one coaching program and you're trying to get that delivered. Focus on the numbers that are important to that. How many people are getting the result? How many clients can you handle at one time? What are you charging? How many hours are going into it? If you're trying to get more sales and leads, focus on just sales and leads. How many sales conversations are you having? How many of those are you able to close into one-on-one clients? How many clients are staying throughout the entire program that you sell them into versus exiting early? Look at those kind of numbers and really streamline it down. Don't look at numbers and focus on numbers that you can't control. Like, it's really hard to control overall website traffic. We can do things that we know are going to trend it up, unless you're running like paid ads and then you're optimizing for website traffic. But unless you're running paid ads, if you're not doing that, then it's hard to control website traffic. We can control activities that should increase traffic. We can control how many blog articles we publish. We can control how many social posts we publish. We can control how many emails we send, but we can't directly impact website traffic. So when you're small and you can only track a certain number of numbers, focus on the ones that you can directly impact. Like, I'm going to publish 4 blog articles a month. I'm going to do 12 social posts in a month, things along those lines, and track if you're actually doing those things. And that will help you keep a little bit of focus and feel a little bit less overwhelmed by stuff. Now, along the same vein, this next question: how do you know if your pricing is too low to pay yourself sustainably? As an entrepreneur, you can do the math. You should be making at least about $350 an hour in most areas of the country. Now, the way we get at that number is you're not working 40 hours a week on directly billable things. Ooh, sorry, frog in my throat this morning. You're not spending all of your time on billable things, right? Some of your time is spent doing things like sitting on this, listening to this podcast episode, listening to this show, taking courses, doing research, reading, doing sales calls, doing social media marketing, doing email marketing, doing personal development, attending events, participating in masterminds, spending time building out things for your business and for your clients. So really, you're only going to spend about 15 to 20 hours a week on directly billable time. We also need to anticipate that you're going to have a certain amount of time off. Like I know so many of us work like 6 and 7 days a week. We work, 60, 80-hour weeks. That's a recipe for burnout. Shouldn't be doing that anyway. But even if you do that, there is downtime. There's time that you spend on errands and stuff outside the house. There's time that you should be spending on vacation. There's time that you're away when you're sick. There's time that you're away if you've got family when they're sick. There's time when, you've got holidays, you've got things like that going on. So anticipate across the year that there's about 2 months that you're not working. And I know that sounds like a lot, but really think about it. Really go back and look at the holidays. Look at the fact that we're only spending 15 to 20 hours a week on billable time anyway. So you're really only talking about half the week off for 8 weeks out of the year. So we're really only talking about 16 to 20, 25 days throughout the entire year that is going to come out of your money. Think about, some of your expenses and stuff that you have to pay. Think about the average cost of living. Think about savings, healthcare, things along those lines, and how all of that is going to factor in. And when you do all of that math, you'll find out that you need to be paying yourself a minimum of at least about $350 an hour in most areas of the US. So when you do that, hey, there's Victoria. Hi, Victoria.
Hey.
So we are talking about why business owners can struggle to pay themselves and how to know if your pricing is too low to be able to even pay yourself sustainably. So I was talking about that math that we've done in the past,
right,
that brings you back to, about $350 an hour that you have to be making minimum to account for the time off, that you're only working 15 to 20 hours a week on directly billable time, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Like it's a lot of numbers and a lot of math, and it's hard to do just on a show like this, but it amounts to about $350 an hour that you must be paying yourself minimum as an entrepreneur. And when you run the numbers on your product lines, which I was talking about earlier, like you have to know what you're charging. You have to know how long it takes to deliver. You have to know how many clients you can take at one time. When you do that math, that sets your price.
Right. And
if the market can't support that price, you have to do a different product. You don't have to charge less. You need to come up with a different product that the market will support, that will pay you.
And that's assuming you have the right market. And
yes.
A lot of times what we do as entrepreneurs, we assume that the market doesn't support it, but maybe you're in the wrong market.
Yeah.
That will support it. So that's especially early stage entrepreneurs. That's a big one for us, because especially if we're givers and we want to give, we typically go after the ones who literally can't afford it right now.
Yeah.
And we box ourselves into that particular market when there is a market who can pay. And when you go after that market, what happens is it frees up. It allows you to be able to help the other market. Maybe not in the sense of you directly offering the same service, but it allows you to create something for that market, but without sacrificing your well-being and livelihood in the process. So you can serve both.
Yeah. And I mean, that's a good point, because we do see a lot of early stage entrepreneurs. They target people who don't have money for a variety of reasons, right? There's some imposter syndrome going on. I don't know if I can really work with people that are that far ahead. There's, devaluing your own superpowers and what you're really good at, because it's easy for you. You assume that it shouldn't be something that people would pay a lot of money for, because you wouldn't pay a lot of money for it.
Right.
Right. Like, you know how to do it. You know how simple it is. So you can't fathom spending that much money on it. There's also thinking that, there just isn't a market for the thing that you do. I'm guilty of this, right? I'm a business designer. So I work with people whose businesses are in a certain level of chaos. And to me, that meant they didn't have enough money, right? So I literally sat down with ChatGPT one day and I was like, okay, here's my mindset gremlin. Help me walk through this. Help me think about this in a different way. And it's like, no, there absolutely is a market that would be able to do your one-on-one services. And it's awesome that you've got stuff at a lower price point in the academy and things along those lines. But, there is people that are far enough along in business that they are making money, but they're not liking it. They want to reinvent some stuff. They want to redesign it. Like for your one-on-one services, target that market versus the ones that aren't making any money yet. It's like, dude, that makes a lot of sense. And it may cause you to change how you deliver your product a little bit because you are serving a slightly different, demographic, slightly different needs. You may need to adjust to make it work correctly. But, it's really important to think about those kind of things. Oh, I can't hear you. Did you get muted?
Yeah, I was muted. Today has been dang. Okay. But I like to do this exercise where I go for, and this is obviously would be for the top echelon of your market, but what would you offer to this if you could just give them everything you can, and provided this is something that they need, and really price it as high as you possibly can without overdoing it, of course, and then working backwards to see how that would work. And that brings up so many, I know we're talking about paying yourself, but if you start at the higher end, you have a whole lot more money to work with a lot less output. And then you can take what you deliver at that level and start breaking it down from there, as opposed to going from the bottom up. You go from the top down.
Yeah. I like that strategy too, because it gets you talking to your clients more. Because typically the more you're charging for something, the more time you're going to spend, the more hands-on conversations that you're having, the more concierge the service is. That really helps you get to know your market. It helps you get to know what the impact actually is of what you're doing. It just having conversations with humans is something that I feel like we stress multiple times every single week when we come on here.
We do, because so many of our people struggle with that. And then some of us don't, like me. I don't, but Melanie doesn't. But so many of our students, especially those who are really heart-centered, do struggle with that.
Yeah.
You get me on the tech, that's another issue. But that's another issue. My brain just leaves the chat. And so, yeah, I love those conversations because you learn so much, and it saves you so much time, energy, and effort, because you'll go out. What we do is we go out and build something. And this ties into paying yourself, because if you're working on the wrong stuff, you're wasting time, you're wasting money, you're wasting energy that you could just go talk to the people. And if you use that top-down approach, you'll get insights that you're like, oh my gosh. And you'll build something that somebody actually wants to pay for. And in the context of the conversation, if you're having those conversations and then they believe that you're developing something, you're going to be the first one on the list for them to go to, even if it's in beta, because they want the help so badly that they'll be your first beta clients, your test clients. And you can just be honest and say, look, I'm building it. I'm building the ship as, I'm building the ship as we're sailing. So they like that because they get to help shape the direction of it. And it's a win-win, because now they almost get to customize it for themselves, and they get in early, and they can pay half or however you decide to price it, of what you'll be charging. But in that process, you'll know how much they value it. Like you might say, oh, I'm going to charge $100,000 for this. And they value it at 200, for example.
Yeah.
Then you start to realize, oh, wow, I can only do one client a year and be okay. And then, it really, you start thinking bigger and broader. Then if you can build something for that, then you can start building something for the ones that can do it. And you just splinter, or you just, scale it back. And then you're able to build something that, for those who can only afford at a certain level. And then some choose to just stay at the higher levels and do that. So
I know,
Definitely.
like, this is something that we've all struggled with. I'm going to put our next question on the screen too. Is a lot of entrepreneurs avoid looking at their numbers. And I know I'm guilty. I'm 100% guilty. This is something that I struggle with as well. But we've also seen it with clients. We sit here and we run the numbers with clients on what they're doing, if it's profitable, if it's sustainable. And we've had these conversations as marketers, as business coaches. It's so frustrating. Why do we think it is that people just avoid the numbers? And what have we done to kind of help get them past that sometimes?
Avoiding the numbers is because you don't want to face the reality of what is. And that's a very dangerous, but the why a lot of times is you might be in love with something, like you might be in love with a product that's not profitable. You might be forced to stop or quit, or it'll just, make you feel bad, whatever. So instead of looking at it, you just avoid it and keep going, assuming it'll turn around at some
Yeah.
point. It's got to turn around at some point. I just need to, and looking at the numbers in that mindset is only going to deter you
Yeah.
from moving forward. So a lot of us just don't want to look at it.
Well, there's the sunk cost bias or sunk cost fallacy as well. It's like I've
Mhm.
put all this time and energy and money
Exactly.
and effort into getting this thing off the ground, and I need to just stick with it. And eventually
Exactly.
I'll get my returns and et cetera, et cetera. And there's a reason why that's called a fallacy. Right? Because just because you put the time and
Exactly.
energy and money and all that stuff into this thing doesn't mean that this is where you're going to get your return, right? This is where you'll see a lot of entrepreneurs chalk it up to a learning moment, an education
Mhm.
moment, things along those lines. Like it didn't work out, but I learned these things along the way, and that was value. Because that's it is hard to just say goodbye to something that you've put a lot of time and energy and effort and money and stuff into, but sometimes you need to.
Yeah.
Sometimes you just need to, and I know as ADHDers, it's really a balancing act because we have a tendency to bounce around like creative entrepreneurs. It's like we don't necessarily give something enough time to work. So we have to strike that middle ground between launching something and giving it enough time to actually show if it's going to work or not, and then tripping over into the sunk cost fallacy of this isn't going to work. I need to pull away. I need to come back. And your numbers is what tells you that.
Right.
It's not a
Right.
guessing game. It's not something you get intrinsically good at.
Right.
It's not something that with enough experience, I'm going to magically be able to tell when it's time to abandon something or double down on it. It's the data, it's the numbers. That's the glorious part of it is if we can get good at the numbers and data, we have something to back that up when we're making decisions. We're not just making gut choices all of the time.
Right. I saw an example of that on Shark Tank one time, and it probably happened a lot. But this guy, I mean, everything was pointing to this is not a good product. Nobody wants it.
Mhm.
And the sharks were telling him it's time to let it go. And he just did not want to go. He was literally in tears. And because of, like you said, the sunk cost fallacy, like he just wanted to keep working at it and working at it. But they didn't have he didn't have anything that for them would make it worth investing in. And they were giving him some advice that, okay, at some point, it's okay. Not every one of our ideas is going to take off, but this is ruining you. It's ruining your family. It's ruining everything. And you want to keep going. And here it is, you're looking for investment, and that's not the answer. The answer is this is not a product, at least as it is, that people want to buy. And that's why
Yep.
you're struggling. It's not like when they're investing in something that has, the proof of concept, it's been proven, and he just didn't have it. But I
Yeah.
thought it was a good thing to show on that show because when they're saying sometimes you got to recognize when it's time to let it go. And he had made it far beyond that point, and they were just compassionately trying to tell him, don't, Not just because of the fact that we're not investing. You should stop this right now. Or
Yeah.
else you're going to lose everything, which he was already on that path. And he
Well, I
kind of
know
just,
we've both had those conversations with clients and stuff too, that it's like, this is going to take you down. This is not worth doing. It's
yeah,
too stressful. It's not profitable. And I mean, sometimes we're wrong, right? And I've seen that even on Shark Tank where they have said that, somebody should give up on something. It's not worth it. They're not investing. It's a bad product. They didn't give up and then it worked out.
yeah, yeah.
There's one going around right now, like Boom Boom Stick or something like that. That was exactly that. And it's blowing up on TikTok. They're making lots of money. They're selling good with it.
Yeah, for sure.
Working for them, but it wasn't investable at the time on Shark Tank.
Yeah.
And the numbers tell you. The numbers tell you, they knew what their profit margins were. They knew what their early sales were. They weren't investable. It didn't make sense to bring an investor in.
Yeah.
But it ended up working out as a product. And then the flip side, the example you gave, like it wasn't investable and it didn't work out as a product.
Yeah. Yeah. And perhaps, and I don't remember the whole thing, maybe the market research, and sometimes it'll work well in one particular case and not another case, or with one positioning and not the other. But and sometimes it's not that it's not good, it's not right now.
Yeah.
And you have to be able to, again, look at the numbers and see, but even with the numbers, looking at your family falling apart around you.
Yeah. I think that's one thing we take for granted because we insist that businesses are sustainable and, that it's not burning the entrepreneur out, that they're balancing personal time and work time. And it's like, there's so many people who don't, like, guilty of that as well. Guilty of that as well. But like, you learn.
The majority don't. You don't learn that balancing act, because just like we're talking about money, it's like, okay, I got to work like this. I got to do this and I got to do this just to get it off the ground. But then when you get it off the ground, now I got to do this because now I got it off the ground and all of this stuff. And then now I got to do it to keep it going. Like it never stops.
Yeah. I mean, that's something we've talked about in the past too, that we run right past a goalpost and don't even realize we did it.
Yeah.
Like so many times because we've already moved it, We've already moved it out there. You start business and you're like, I need to replace my regular income. And then you're like, well, now I realize how many expenses I have. So I have to replace my income plus this amount of money. So even when you've already hit the point that you've replaced your income, you just flew right past it because you still feel broke. So you just set new numbers and you just keep running. And then you look back 20 years later and you're like, man, I've hit a lot of goalposts on the way and didn't even think about it because I'm still in some kind of way or whatever.
And most of what we've seen and we continue to see, that's why the academy is structured to take care of the whole human, because in the early stages, to build in a way in where you're taking care of your whole human. Because what do we see? What happens over and over and over? You get sick at some point and it forces you to stop.
Yeah. You lose your income, you lose your stability, you lose everything.
You start losing, you lose spouses and relationships with children, suffer, your health suffers, and you have to stop. And it's usually in that pause that they realize, wait a minute, it wasn't even worth it. Like, I can pause and be okay. And then they start changing and they pull back a whole lot more than they do. It's like a rubber band. They pull way back and they get very, very selective and intentional because they've lost so much. We try to help avoid that and saying, look, what's your dream life to begin with? And incorporate that into the building so you don't have to go through that suffering of losing so much to try to get it back later.
Well, not to make decisions too. Like we just had a student make a really big decision. She had a lot of things going on. She was running an agency and trying to grow her agency, and then at the same time investing in real estate and growing some stuff up. And then she came to me and she's like, I think I want to get out of the agency and just focus on the real estate. And it's scary. And I don't know if that's a good decision. I know it doesn't fit the plan that we had. I'm like, wait a minute, it does though. Yeah. And we went back and looked at some of those very early answers on like, what do you want for your business? What do you want for your life? What is your goal? What is your mission behind what you're doing and everything you're trying to build? And in that was, I want to build real estate. I want to invest in real estate. I want to be able to help vets in the Dominican Republic and in, the United States. And I want to be able to create these things and do all this stuff. And it's like, you're already hitting that point. You've already hit that point. That was the goal. The agency was a means to an end to create additional revenue, to do those things and to get that off the ground. You did it faster than you anticipated. So you don't have to keep growing an agency anymore. It's okay. And it's like going back to those early answers. Spending that time, think about, what do you want for your life? What do you want your impact to be? What do you want, like, what matters to you? And it gave her the freedom to make those decisions.
Right, exactly. Now imagine without the mentorship and how that could have looked very, very differently.
Yeah.
And that's where most go, because it's like you don't stop to really just think. And most of us don't stop in the beginning to even map out what it is that I'm really want. And you were able to say, yeah, but you've reached that point. This is what you said you originally wanted. And now she doesn't have to feel guilty about it. It's like, wait a minute, I was able to accomplish my dream without having to do all of this. Now, me looking at it, I was like, something is going to fall away. What it is, I don't know. But just seeing so much in the beginning, but she was doing so well, right?
Yeah.
She was doing so well with all of it. And then she came to the conclusion on her own that, you know what? But then you have that foundation of, it's okay.
Yeah. Well, and that focus on what you want, right? And making sure that was top of mind. She's like, I don't think I'm enjoying this part right now.
Right.
And when we got to like the nuts and bolts of it, there was one little piece that she enjoyed, and now she's actually going to be one of my business partners. So, because that piece that she enjoyed was something that I was looking for in one of my businesses, and now she can focus on that and doing her real estate and let the agency stuff go. And it's so powerful, not only
and this has been
to have that focus, but to have that support, like you mentioned with the mentorships. Like a lot of times we don't have mentors that are around for that long, because this wasn't a short journey. I mean, it was short in the grand scheme of things, like to hit that milestone sooner than even I thought she would. But I mean, it was like a year and a half, 2 years.
But see, a year and a half and 2 years with mentorship and support outside of that, this would have been several years and several, like, it would have just gotten bad in most cases.
Yeah.
And it's just watching that growth, because I think for us, the mentorship is the biggest value, because you can get courses other places. And we're just upfront. You can get courses. Now you might get them for 13 different places and then they end up sitting on the shelf. But that guidance and that mentorship that's based around your life and everything, that is priceless. And that is what allows you, like what they said, the proverb is, if you want to go fast, go alone. But if you want to go far, go together.
Ooh.
And
I like
when
that.
you have the right team and the right mentorship, you can do both.
Yeah.
You can do both.
Well, and I mean, having somebody that is there for that long, that pays attention to your journey, that understands what you've got going on. Like a lot of times we'll do stuff like hire a coach for 3 months or 6 months, and then we're done. They got us through one phase, but they're not there for the whole journey. They're not there watching and guiding and answering questions and paying attention to who we are for years. A lot of times it's pretty short. And I think that's one of the biggest things that we do, is not just come in for a season, but come in for, I feel like this is cheesy, but kind of come in for a reason. Like we're trying to get you from like here to there. And until you get there, we're still there.
Yeah.
Like wherever there is. And it's different for everybody. Like we've had students that want to, end up with a business that they have a small group of elite clientele. They're hosting glamping retreats on their chicken farm once a quarter, having a good time with a small group of people like that. We've got other students that dream of traveling the world, speaking on stages, getting paid as keynotes, making major impacts and shifts in the world, and everything in between, right? Like there is no one size fits all business model. There is like some foundational pieces that every business needs to do to be successful. But then beyond that, the sky's the limit. We can, pick and choose and change and adjust. And I think that's the struggle that a lot of entrepreneurs have, is trying to piecemeal. Like you said, you can go to a bunch of different courses, you can sign up for a ton of things, you may have 20, 30 different things, but then you're stuck trying to figure out how to piece it all together into what you need for you. And you're usually trying to do it on your own.
And that's
incredibly hard.
That's incredibly hard because, like, I would talk about, I'm not I have creative tendencies, but I'm not a creator. I'm not one of those. And so everything I purchased before was built by and for a creator. And so whatever they were doing and teaching other creators to do kept them in their flow, but it took me out of mine.
Yeah. Well, and a lot of stuff that's out there is people that did it the old way, too. It's like, it's creators, but it's also people that they made their money, they had their success 10, 15, 20 years ago.
Yeah.
And they're trying to teach you how to do what they did because it's what worked for them.
Right.
But the world is a lot different right now than it was 10, 15, 20 years ago.
Right.
A lot different. The stuff that, I was able to use to grow my business back then doesn't necessarily work now. It's a different world. I mean, we're talking, when we first started building websites, you had to convince people that the internet wasn't going away.
Yeah.
Like, this isn't a passing fad. You need to have a presence online. It's a thing. We were working with people when the first social media channels started really becoming a thing for business. And people were starting to get on these social media vlogging and blogging sites, and like video marketing wasn't a thing when I was getting started.
Yeah.
So you taught in person, you worked locally. Like I was one of the, only businesses in my area that had international clients, and it made me like such a big deal. Cause we could talk internationally without big phone bills for some of the first time ever, or communicate through email, about stuff. And it was huge. It was a big deal back then. So it's like growing a business now versus then. It's a bit different.
A little bit. Yeah, it's crazy. But, I think we strayed a little bit from our topic. But yeah, it all ties into, if you're paying yourself, that means you have the mental, emotional, physical bandwidth to create, to do what you want to do, because now you're not on the struggle bus. And then you got that. And when you're on the struggle bus, you make poor decisions. When you make poor decisions, you have to deal with the consequences of those decisions. And it just snowballs. And
we'll put this one up. So it's kind of what you're talking about, right? Like profit margins impact how you actually pay yourself because of how we're taught. And I mentioned this at the beginning before you popped on, but like the Mike McAllowitz profit first model, like you pay yourself before you even think about profits or other expenses. Like you're the first expense on your business. You have to be. You just have to be. That's just how that works, right? Yeah. And a lot of times we're not taught that. We're taught that you make money, you pay your bills, you have some money left over that is your profit, and then you can take some of that profit or all of that profit and pay yourself. And that's how entrepreneurs get paid. And if your products and services aren't profitable, you don't get paid.
Yeah.
Which is not the way to do it, right? Like we're trying to make money as entrepreneurs, so we need to get paid.
And that means you might have to get down and make and figure out those costs. And I love when you always bring up the that, because he breaks down the typical, the profit, the taxes.
Yeah, it's like if you're making less than $250,000 a year, then it's 50% goes to you, 50% goes to you, 15% goes to taxes, 5% goes to savings, 30% goes to expenses, or something to that effect.
Yeah, 30% is operating expenses. 15, around 15, I think. Is it 15 for taxes?
I think it's 15% for taxes, 5% for savings, and 30% for expenses, and 50% is your pay.
Your pay. Right.
And he has you do revenue minus profit equals expenses. So like you're thinking about all of those things. You're planning for your profit margins. You're planning for your pay before you're thinking about expenses. So after paying yourself, after putting money back for taxes, after putting money back for savings, now that's your budget for
For the
expenses.
expenses.
Because I
And
know that's
that's
something we run into a lot. Like people like, I don't know if I can afford that. I can't, pay this. I don't know about signing up for ChatGPT. If you're running your numbers and you're tracking them like that, you know what your expense budget is. You know that you have this much left
right.
after paying yourself.
After paying yourself. Like
After
if you in what was the first threshold? 250, right?
Yeah, it's like 250,000 a year. And he does have
250,000.
caveats even with that. So like if you just Google that little chart or if you just read the book,
Yeah,
that is not the whole story. It's
exactly.
different for different businesses. Some businesses have higher profit margins, some business models have
Mhm.
lower profit margins. Entrepreneurs, most of your service-based businesses should have a minimum 30% profit. But it is common for service-based businesses to have 50 to 60% profit margins. Like that is typical if you're planning your stuff out the right way, targeting the right type of clients that can afford what you offer, optimizing your services so that you can deliver the outcome with the least amount of overhead and time invested, minimal staff. Like a lot of times we move straight to paying for software, hiring people
Mhm.
before we pay ourselves. And that's not a good way to do it. Like one of my, little guardrails that I throw up for a lot of our students is I want to see you making at least like 20K a month before you hire. Because that means 10K take home.
And that means you have to be really efficient
Yeah.
with
It
how
makes you
you're
think about
doing
your business
things and how
differently.
you're spending the money. So 20K a month is right around that 250 mark, 240, right?
Mhm.
So that part, when you're working, again, this is something that no one teaches you,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
And supports you on, because when you're structuring the projects, you're realizing that, okay, if I'm going to do this, that means I'm going to bring home 125K. I'm structuring the business this way now, at least at this stage, early stage, 125K minimum, minimum. It could be higher. It can be higher depending on your profit margins. I like to play with the numbers starting with the 80% profit margin, simply to see what I can deliver at that level and then move it back. Again, that's the top down approach.
Well,
Like,
and you
look,
get more money out of the other buckets. And that's something that people don't really tell you either. Because if you're putting
yeah,
5% back to savings, you can get into savings every so often when it hits a certain threshold. You decide, usually it's 3 months operating expenses that you have in savings. After
mm,
that, then you can pull it out and you can pay yourself. You get a bonus out of that.
mm,
You
mm,
save your 15% for taxes at the end of the year. If you don't use your whole 15% budget, you get another bonus for yourself. So even that 50% is not the only thing you're making. You're typically going to get some money out of your savings. You're typically going to get some money out of your taxes. Depending on your risk profile, the advice is either 3 months or 6 months of operating expenses. If you're in a highly volatile industry that has like big seasonal swings or, can get impacted by a stock market up and down or something along those lines, it's usually more 6 months. If you're in something that's pretty more stable, doesn't really have seasonal, doesn't have big shifts, doesn't get impacted by outside factors very often, 3 months operating expenses. But beyond that, once you've got that put away, you get to draw from that.
yeah.
Right.
And
And
again,
I
doing it
think a
that
lot of
way.
people are afraid to give people hard numbers like that. They're afraid to say you cannot hire help until you make $20,000. Is that going to hold true for every single entrepreneur? No. But if you think that way, if you plan that way, it puts some guardrails on you. And as you get closer to 20K a month in revenue and 10K a month in take home, you know more, right? You can make more decisions. You can decide if at 15K you can hire. You're more educated and experienced, and you can make these decisions for yourself better,
Mm,
you know?
right. Yeah,
And
for sure.
it just makes you think about it a little differently. It makes you optimize your business a little bit
Yeah,
differently. It makes you
exactly. I
think
was
about,
thinking,
how can I streamline? How can I use software? How can I do these things instead? And it doesn't mean you won't get help with anything. That's not what
yeah,
I'm saying. I'm saying like you don't get a staff employee, a regularly paid, salaried or hourly contractor or employee. You can hire someone to build a website. You can still outsource projects. You're just not putting a consistent drain on your bank account until you hit 20K.
And that's a key
Just
point.
a general guideline to kind of get you started.
And when you're pricing your products, you're pricing it in a way that factors all of this in.
Yeah.
Because if you say, hey, I'm charging 5,000, knowing that you're getting 2,500 on the topic of this, most of them will be like, oh, I got to put all of this money back into the business. I got to hire this person. No, you get $2,500. And then the rest goes into this bucket. Now you have to figure out how to work within that. But, we want to just dump it all back into the business. And back into the business and wonder why we're broke. So yeah, for sure.
That was actually one of our questions we had queued up. Balancing reinvesting in the business with making sure you take home a paycheck. And I think what we've said kind of is how you do that, right? So, look at the average cost of living in your area. Look at how much money you need to make. Like I gave you the generalized, we need to charge, $350 an hour so that we can take time off, only be working 15 to 20 hours a week on billable time, et cetera, et cetera. But look at your area. Look at what the cost of living is. It costs a lot less where I'm at in North Georgia than it does in California or New York or Seattle or really expensive cities like that. Right? Around here, 120, 130,000 a year is good money, right? You can live pretty good where I'm at. In Seattle, not the case. They need to make closer to 200,000, right? For the same quality of life that I have here. So start with that, right? And if we know that you're taking home 50% from your business as an early stage entrepreneur making less than $250,000 a year, less than, around that range, 250,000 is not a hard line, right? It may be 300,000, 350,000, whatever, before your percentages start to change. So if you need to take home, 200,000, you need to make 400,000. And you're only going to do it in about 15 to 20 hours a week of billable time. So that's your number, right? It's easy to do that math. So say 20 hours a week billable time times 48 weeks in a year, right? That gives you 12 weeks off where you're not making
960 hours. Got my calculator right here.
I was about to say, did you just do that in your head, please?
No, baby. I wish, but I didn't.
So do that math, right? 20 hours
math,
a week, 40 weeks each year that you're going to be putting into directly billable time, and how much money you need to make, and just do that math. Now, any product that you need to make, all you have to know is how many hours am I going to spend delivering it times the hourly number that I need to make, and that's what I have to charge. Done, right? That's how you balance reinvesting in the business with taking home a paycheck, is you plan for your paycheck first. If you have money left over, now you get to reinvest. That 30% expense budget is where you reinvest in your business. I love it when the answers are that simple. It makes my life easier.
Yeah. And it is really that simple. Just take some time to crunch the numbers. And it's like, huh.
Yeah. And if you say that you're bad at math, I'm going to throw something that a finance coach taught me one time. She's like, when you go to the grocery store, can you find the best deal on toilet paper?
Yeah.
And I was like, I happened to have had that conversation with her after I had just sat here and done the math. I went to Walmart.com and a couple other places you can order online, and went to Amazon.com and did the, the plies and the sheets per roll and the sheets in a package and I had really gone to town to figure out if Amazon Subscribe and Save was the best buy on toilet paper, because I was tired of standing in the toilet paper aisle trying to do math every single time. So I was like, I really had not a leg to stand on when she threw that back at me. And I was like, I'm not good at math. I can program spreadsheets and program software, but just sitting here doing math, not my forte at all. And she's like, can you get the best deal on toilet paper?
And you can get the best, because you gave me that thing, and I was just like, you spent all of that time on toilet paper. But
it wasn't the only thing I was doing. I was looking at making my life easier. It was right when Amazon Subscribe and Save was really starting to get popular. They were doing those 15% off, if you have 6 things or whatever it was. And I was like, I bet I could take some of those bulky things that take up a lot of room in my buggy and a lot of room in my car, and I need, every single week, and put those on Amazon Subscribe and Save and probably save money and simplify my life. And so it was a whole mission. Toilet paper was not the only thing that I did that with. It was pretty much every regular household anything and had it all on Subscribe and Save. And my mailman hates me, but I save money. And save stress because all of our regular items just show up once a month. So makes my life a heck of a lot easier. So I will take it. That's what we're all about, is making our lives easier. So all right, I know we are at time. This is a really good topic. We have talked about a lot of the high level. We've talked about like mindset. We've talked about, the importance of knowing your numbers and tracking your numbers. But the one who can really tell you what all this looks like in practice and how to actually implement it is one of our mentors, Courtney, who is amazing as a bookkeeper, helping people with like all of these questions and so many more on like, what does this look like in practice? What does this look like to actually do it day to day, to actually make sure you're paying yourself correctly as owner draw or payroll? Because there's a whole lot more that people need to know when it comes to actually paying yourself. And we are not the experts in that, but Courtney is. And you can come join us next week on campus at a free training event to hear all that directly from her and learn how to implement this the right way and start actually getting paid. As a business owner, if you're in business right now and you're not getting paid, like that is the problem to solve. That is it. That is now at the top of your priority list. If you're not taking home a paycheck, that is the problem, the priority, and Courtney's going to help you figure it out. Next week on campus, head over to neurospicyacademy.com/events and sign up, and we hope to see you there. Bye, guys. Happy statue.